As the refugee crisis in Europe and Turkey has grown and Europe's economy has wavered, populist parties have made significant gains throughout the region. What does that mean for global security? Is the EU doomed?
I hope the answer is no, but I was at a big European conference a little less than a year ago, and all of you have been at these situations where you're asked to take your iPhone out and you get to vote on things, and they did a word cloud, which is they gave you a prompt. In 20 years, the EU will be, and the word that started growing on the screen until it was monstrous proportions was gone. And the whole audience that was typing this in, but people were just sort of shocked and appalled by the notion that this project that has been the focus of Europe and has been in so many dimensions quite successful would ultimately fail and disappear. I think this is something we have to actively try to prevent. But I do think the premise of the question is right, which is that Europe is under enormous economic pressure because they have pursued a set of economic policies that have not stimulated recovery along the lines that we've been able to experience, although that's still a work in progress. But that they are really struggling economically. At the same time, you have this influx, overwhelming number of refugees, and real difficulty in terms of handling that, integrating, and so forth. And that has set the stage for, in many countries, some very xenophobic right-wing parties to take root. Now, I'll note that many of these parties are receiving direct funding from, guess, Russia. And this goes back to, this is a Vladimir Putin operation. Part of what he's doing is funding political parties, civil society groups that articulate positions that bring some of these European countries closer to the views of Russia. And also, ultimately, he may be someone who does operations, but he does have objectives. He may not have a strategy, but he has objectives. And one of his objectives is to divide Europe. He would love to see the EU fail. He would love to see NATO go away. And so I think this is a serious crisis. The U.S. is not disinterested in terms of the outcome. And I think we need to be doing much more in trying to help Europe deal with some of the drivers behind this crisis.
I mean, I'm a big-time Europeanist, in part by family affiliation. My wife is German. My children have EU passports. They have American passports as well. And my mother-in-law was chef de cabinet to the former president of the European Parliament. My father-in-law was a diplomat. It's wonderful when you can travel from Paris to Vienna or wherever, never having to cross a border. And that's something that ought to be celebrated. I think the EU lost a sense of its limits. I think there was a kind of utopianism that infected the project at some point. I think it was aggressive and maybe foolish to bring in some of the newer member states before they were ready. It was probably foolish to bring Greece into the Eurozone, and it's paying the price for some of that ebullience or overambition. I think it's going to pay a price for the overambition of bringing in the number of refugees that it is. I mean, of course you need a humane and humanitarian policy. But first of all, the numbers are overwhelming. Greece is overwhelmed, broken. It was broken already. But more dangerously, you are now seeing, because of this influx, a huge political boon to all of the ugly parties of Europe, all of the parties that had been there for years, xenophobically railing against immigrants. They're the beneficiaries of this because you can't look away from what happened in Cologne on New Year's Day. You can't look away from the fact that among this huge influx of migrants, you have a security issue, that it's not simply a humanitarian problem. There is a security component. There's a massive economic component, especially, by the way, at the lower level, where these new migrants will be competing for scarce jobs, some of them perhaps being held by the sort of people who might be attracted to a Pegida in Germany or the Front National in France. And so European leaders need to be attuned to the risks that over-ambition creates reactionaries. And I think the real threat now to Europe is as much that reactionary spirit as anything else.
Yeah. Right. He gets all the short questions. Is the South China Sea an old-fashioned tinderbox? Is war bound to break out?